of the Gemara we're learning right now. This Gemara is we're in Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, and I would say, like we sometimes say before Gemara, Daf Halden Cup. Let me quickly recap what we did so far, so we make sure we understand it clear. And that is as follows: the Mishnah told us you found a contractual loan. And if in the loan, in the contract, it says that there's a lien on all the properties, so Rav Meir says then you don't return it. You don't return it to the lender, because he will collect with it again, maybe again. What is the borrower saying? We don't know yet. The Mishnah doesn't tell us, so that's what we're going to discuss, and that's going to be all the different opinions. But Rav Meir does say there's no achrayis nechasim. It doesn't mention anything about a lien on the properties. Then you do give it back. Why you give it back then, we'll soon see. The Chachamim say, ben kach or ben kach lo yach. You never give it back. Since it fell to the ground, you don't know who to give it back to. Don't give it back. So the first opinion, something like that, until we bring proof, Eidim or something. So now we have Abaya and Rabasi both learn the Mishnah. Starting to point is as follows. Abaya and Rabasi both say that the Mishnah is talking about where the borrower agrees that he owes the money still. He owes the money. So what's the problem then? Why don't we give it back? Why does Rav Meir and the Chacham say that if there's a lien on the property, everyone agrees, you don't give it back? Why not? It belongs to the lender. He didn't pay it yet. So Rav Asi learned, we are worried that it's a shtar mukdim, that you wrote the shtar in Nisan and you didn't actually have transact the loan until Tishrei. And the problem then is that that when does the lien really kick in? Only in Tishrei, but because the date says Nisan, you are going to take from the lekuchas incorrectly. So it's a shtar mukdim. Then the question is, how come it says in another Mishnah that you're permitted to write a contractual loan for the leiva, and he'll just wait around until he actually gets the loan? That's a shtar mukdim. How can you do that? So we answer that you're right. You cannot do that. You cannot write a shtar mukdim. But our Mishnah is talking about a shtar akna. What's a shtar akna? That in the shtar, you're right, that there's a lien on the property starting today. And according to Moshe Shani, that means even the loan never took place. There's a lien on the properties. I'm being makna the shibud of the properties to you. Okay, so that's Rav Asi explaining why you don't give it back. So he wants to have it ready, available as soon as the guy's ready, has the money to give him, because he needs the money urgently. Doesn't want to takes a day or two to write a document. He has it all prepared, ready to go. As soon as the lends him the money, it's okay. So according to Rav Asi, our mission is talking about shtar hakna. There's no shot because the shtar moved him. So then the question is, so how come we say it's a shtar hakna, it's a shibud? So how come then? So therefore, so what's the problem? Why don't we give it back? Because now that it fell down on the ground, that's called a reyesa, and that tells us that could be that this. No, this. Our question is, if so, why don't you give it back? Because nobody writes a shtar mukdim, so in our Mishnah here, give it back. There's nothing wrong with it, and he owes the money because there's a reyesa here, there's a weakness here, and the weakness is it fell to the ground. Once it falls to the ground, there's a weakness, and we start suspecting everything. The Ritva and the Ramban writes that little piece of the Gemara explaining that there's a weakness and so on was not written by the Gemara. It was written by the Gaonim. And if we don't have enough time now to explain all that. But interesting, the Ritva always picks up wherever in our Gemara, in the beginning of Kedushin, here, 2 places here, in this blot actually, that was written by Rabbi Hodoy going not by the Gemara. Because he said he cannot believe that the Gemara would ask such a question and give such an answer. It's an amazing thing that he says. And that's important is because in the Bar-Ilan University, unfortunately, there's professors in the Bible, what do you call it, the Gemara Talmudic professors, they decided that most of the Gemara is written by Rabbanos Furai. They have absolutely no basis for it, and it's such hypocrisy, it's unbelievable, and they call themselves frum. But they go have this whole theory that the reason why the Rambam passes differently than many Shema different Gemaras is because nobody knew how to learn Gemara, not Rashi, not Tosfos. They had no idea how to learn Gemara. They assumed that the Gemara was just linear, that it's all Gemara, all written by Amoraim. The Rambam is the only one to figure it out that most of the Gemara is not written by Amoraim. In fact, the only parts of the Gemara written by Amoraim where it says Amar Abaya, Amar Rav. Explain that's how they say. All the discussions in the Gemara, if it doesn't have a name, is Rabbanos Furai. And that's why the Rambam ignored it. And he comes up sometimes with talking totally against the general thrust of the Gemara because he figured out how to learn Gemara. Chas v'shalom. But I'm just giving you an example that if we're right here on the Gemara on the piece we just said right now, and Beis said this is written not by the Gemara but by Yehuda going. He says so the same being condition, and he says in a few places. Only with the Rishonim say that can you say that. Especially what Rashi says in Seichel Apel. Oh, what's he talking about? Metzia? Pointed out when I get to that Rashi. Okay, let's continue now. Abaye comes along and says, no, I did. We're not too much talking now. We're talking about all starters and the talking about his chayiv made that he's made, and that's why you give it back to him if he doesn't agree. That's why you give it back to him if it's there's no achrayis nechasim, then the only one you can collect from is from the labor. Therefore, you give it back to the mal because he loads of money. But if there is a achrayis nechasim, you know what? I don't give it back. And you don't give it back. You know why? So they buy it because I'm worried that there's some kind of a deal going on between these two, and the deal is that I sold property. The borrower sold property to people without giving them any guarantees. If they lose it, he'll reimburse them. And he says to the lender, "Let's together pull it back, and we'll split it." How come this Mishnah says that you're allowed to write a star without anybody around? That's because I hold Eida b'chasum of Zochla. So the Eidim sign, the star is committed. And the Rabbanan hold, however, you can never get back even with the non-chayis nechasim because they hold achrayis toy seferu, which means writing down in a contract that there's a lien is unnecessary. Nobody lends money without security, and therefore it's automatic. And that's what I made. The Chacham say you never get it back because the lekuchas will get hurt. Let's go now to the Gemara. Says the Gemara. So let's go about Abaye. Says start again from Abaye. About 10 lines to the top of the page. You give them an olive. Abaye says. Even as soon as they sign, it's like even a star that is not you do not put in there. I'm being makna you my shibud straight away from the kashale that bothered him. Even once you tell me Ravasi that bestarted the lam hakna, you're telling me that if it's not hakna, you're not allowed to write such a star. I don't believe that even fell down. You should be choshed that such a star was written. You know why? Because you have Adam signing. I don't believe that Adam are going to sign a star. That's it's awesome. Just because it's on the ground, you think maybe it was paid up or whatever. But to say that it was written before the date that Adam signed it, I find that unacceptable. He less you don't write it. Is like because I can't believe that you tell me. Oh, but the reason why I'm mentioning it back is maybe it just so happened to be that it was written a star mugdim. I don't believe star mugdim. According to Abaye, how can never be a star mugdim? Every time the star was signed by Adam, it's already kicks in. So what do you mean? The whole concept of star mugdim had in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. So star mugdim is, according to Abaye, would be a good way to explain this. That it was, let's say, the Aleph Nisan, and you wrote an earlier date. Not that you wrote today's date, but you didn't lend till 6 months later. You were sitting the first day of Nisan, and you wrote it was the first day of Adar. So you brought forward the date, and that's called a stam muktim because that's not true, and it's not retrospective. Abaye says, "He found the get for women. He found the shikra avodim, get the liberated avodim, or taitike, or start savo that a guy who's dying wrote down matana, the shavim, or start matana, or shavim receipt. He found it on the ground. What do you do? At age of last, you don't give back to anybody. You don't know where it came from. Maybe were written, and was changed. You change your mind, so therefore they never became activated. But you were by hold as soon as the Adam signed. It's activated. Who cares? You change your mind. So they signed, became activated. Says the Gemara, you missed the main point. Abaye says it's retrospective. As soon as the Adam signed, when you lend the money, maybe 6 months later, retrospectively, when did the star become activated from the time the Adam signed it? But you still need to think that occur. So if they change their mind, then the Abaye says, well, the Adam don't activate it on their own. It's only if the transaction happens. Let's take it tonight. We're signing, and if the transaction happens, then from today it's already been activated. When the money eventually gets his hand, the other money not get his hand. We don't say. Ella Masnis and the Tony Motor Story in our Mishnah it said you found Story if there was a lien on it. And you Abaye told us, well, Kim you told us that the labor is made that I still owe the money. And you're telling me you're not worried about Star Mukdim, you don't agree with Ravasi. And you're not really worried. So according to Ravasi, it makes sense. Why don't you give it back? If the labor is made, he owes the money, right? And generally speaking, we don't write a stam muktim. So why don't you give it back to the lender? Why is that made? Everyone's getting. He says that Mishnah that says that you're permitted to write a star muktim is only if it's committed. Mukila b'shtar d'lavak. So he'll say that Amish is talking about it wasn't a star, it was not a star hakna, and therefore we are, even though generally speaking nobody would write such a star, but since you found it lying on the ground, maybe it was done wrong, and that's why it's on the ground. They tossed it away. In other words, what's the problem? It's not a star hakna. It's not a, and because it's not a star hakna, you had no right to write a star mukdim, because you'll cheat the lekuchas. You're gonna collect from the lekuchas 6 months earlier. The loan took place 6 months later. You collect from the date of the thing. It's a wrong start, and that's why you don't give it back. Because why else would you find it on the floor? Something went awry. Something went wrong. Okay, I mean, but Abaye says that what? That even if that's what happened, the Eidim signed. That's the day that actually the shibud started. Eidim bechasuma zachin. As soon as you signed it, there's like. So why don't you go back to the Malva? The labor's made, he owes the money. It's a proper star with Adam sign on it. Even if you're worried that maybe they were signed before the actual transaction, who cares? The moment the Adam signed, it happened. And eventually the transaction happened because the labor's made. I owe the money. And I didn't pay it yet.
Dropped it, maybe such a good start, therefore.
Yeah, but what was exactly? Exactly. So what? No, but you didn't care for it anymore. Instead of throwing it away by mistake, you dropped it over there. But something had to. We think that a person is very careful with his start. This is worth money. So if he dropped it, what could go wrong? Abaye doesn't like that. Abaye says you're saying that the agent signed a document they should never have signed. You're getting too many people involved in this mistake here. He doesn't accept it. But that's what Abaye says. Fine. But according to Abaye, so it's a problem. So he introduces now this new concept. Abaye, you know what the problem is? The guy really did pay. And together they have some kind of an arrangement and a letter of agreement where they're going to rob, they're going to cheat. They're the buyers that he sold property to without giving any guarantees. So he'll schlep the Balchay will schlep the property away, and then he'll divide it 50-50. And that person has no recourse, can't go back to the thing. Now, okay, now we're introducing a third opinion. Shmuel said clearly, I don't believe for a minute that the labor paid back. You know why I don't believe for a minute? Because in my opinion, the moment you pay back, the first thing you do is you rip it up. In case you forget where it is, the first thing you do is rip it up. And we had that before, Tanav said the same thing. But if the labor would have paid back that document, the lender has to give him the document back. The labor ripped it up. How can we found it on the floor? There's no way in the world he paid it back. No way. We're not worried about deals. Is Michael Neimer, so according to Shmuel, how are you going to learn Pshat in our Mishnah? So if he learns like Rabasi, no problem. If he holds like Rabasi, that the only time you're permitted to write a star early is Star Hakno, because you committed from today, so you're not cheating anybody. Muki Masnisin Mishter Lavakno. So like Rabasi, Am is talking about an ordinary star, which is not Hakno. So generally speaking, we're assuming that the loan took place the same day that it was signed, but now that you found it on the floor, there's a possibility that it was written before, and you're going to cheat the buyers because you're going to collect from the date on the star. So Shmuel agrees with Rabasi. That's not Mishnah. We're talking about the labor was made, that he owes the money. We don't return it because we're scared that it was written now that he found it on the floor. Maybe that's what happened. He owes like a buy that what as soon as they signed, it's a commitment, and the labor is made that he owes the money. And I don't believe Shmuel doesn't believe that maybe he paid up because you ripped up the star. What's going on? How come they all say don't give it back? Why not? So Mor says Shmuel. Now we have a third approach. Shmuel mukil maslisin kisha ein chayiv moeder. Shmuel says you're right. If the borrower is moeded that he owes the money, why not give it back? What could go wrong? He owes money. You have a contract there with agent signing it. And we're not worried about Shtar Mugdim because the agent signing it kicks in straight away. Give it back. You know what the Amish is talking about? He denies it. Now there's three possible denials. Either he says it's a fraudulent star, or he says I wrote it to prepare, but I never used it, or he says it was a good star, but I paid it back. So I was never made. So you might ask the question, so if he denies it, so what does the Mishnah say? But if there's no lien on the property, the mayor says, the Bava say, still don't give it back. The mayor says, then give it back. What do you give it back? If there's no lien on the property, you can still have a right to collect it from the borrower, right? It's like a move up pet. You can't go to Lekuchas, but you can go to the borrower. But the borrower is saying, it's a fraudulent start. Why? What would you give it back to the lender? You found it on the floor. How do you know what happened there? True, you don't collect from the lekuches, but you do collect from the unencumbered estate. You know, you go directly to the borrower and collect. So why do you think it came from the lender? Maybe the borrower paid it back. Shmuel says Shmuel Tamei. You know why? Shmuel is consistent in his view. The Amar Shmuel said, Oimer Hoy Rab Meir. Shmuel goes a step further. Shmuel says Rab Meir says Shtar Choiv she'ein by achrayis nechasim. A shtar choiv that has no achrayis ain't goive. You do not collect loy mishabadi or loy minei bechari. Shmuel holds that if this Meir holds, you have to put a lien in there. If you don't put a lien in there, then what is it? If you don't put a lien in there, then it's like a piece of paper. It's a piece. It's a piece of paper because it's not a star anymore. The whole idea of a star is that it gives you the right to collect from the kuchas. Now that there's, even though they're aiding, they're just a milvat peh. And a milvat peh, you can say I paid it back. You can say whatever you want. It's not a document anymore. Exactly. It's not yet. Sorry. No, put in the star. And a safer should know. You go to professional. You don't write yourself. You go to safer. You'll see tomorrow's Gemara. Shmuel said you asked every time you're on a star, you would ask him. So do you want to put in the chrayas? You ask the safer. The safer who was worth the salt would ask the question.
So anyone who doesn't have a price can't borrow.
According to Rameh, anyone who has you have, but the document is worth.
But according to Shmuel, you can't claim.
Not based on the document. If the other guy denies it. Says the Gemara, if you can't use the document for anything, is it my yachsa? What's the point? Yeah. The famous word, lots of applications. Let him use it as a bottle stopper. The Gemara to put on the malva's bottles. Why give it to malva's a bottle stopper? Also, what bottle stoppers? Lots of applications. We don't know who it belongs to. The Gemara says, but Gemara is very simple. What's the Rebbe saying? He's saying Adam, it's Bava Metzia, it's fraudulent. So what right do you have to take a piece of paper? So you have no banana. Exactly. It must be the Malvas. So we give it to Malva, but it's worthless. You can't use it to go collect with. It's worthless.
They started arguing about their property, they ended up arguing about
Exactly. That's why it doesn't pay to have disputes. Says the Gemara, okay, so we have so far Rav Asi, we have Abaya, and we have Shmuel. Shmuel says, different than Abaya and Rav Asi, you guys say the Machlekes mission is that the leg was moida, right? And the question is whether it's a shtar mugdim or we're worried about there was a deal and he paid up. I say that we don't think the guy ever paid up because he would have ripped it up. I say, if he was moida, of course he give back. Talking about the labor denies it. Because the labor denies it, therefore you don't give it back. How can Amir says if there's no achrayis, you do give it back because it's a worthless piece of paper. So I might give it back. Says the Gemara. There's two more opinions on how to learn the Gemara. Okay, so that's how come. Machlek na Rabbi Lazar, we move from Babel, we move that to Yisrael. Rabbi Lazar says Machlekes. The whole Machlekes is I learn like Shmuel. That the machlekes on mission is when the leiva is denying that this is a proper star. The Rameir holds star she'ein by achrayis nechasi. And Rameir holds so you don't give it back because he denies it. So how can Rameir say, but you do give it back when it's not achrayis? Rameir holds star she'ein by achrayis nechasi ain't a goy v'loy mishbadi v'loy nechad. Just like Shmuel, because Rameir holds it's a worthless piece of paper. Therefore, okay, you don't give it back because you might take from the kuchas, but you know, but you do give it back if it's only b'nei chorin because he cannot collect. All it is milva peh. Now, what's the logic behind it? The fact is he has a star. Okay, so there's no. I mean, think what's the logic? Okay, there's no lien on the property. There's no lien on the property, but I have Adam signed that I lent him $100. So why isn't at least worth the document to collect from the? What do you mean that you cannot collect from the shabbat, nor can you collect from the chori? Why not? Rashi doesn't give us an explanation. Why not? So there's a general question, very bekitzer. Beautiful tzachayishin in Simon, I think Ches. There's a concept called mepihem v'loy mepik sabah. And when we learn from that api edim, Yakum Davar, so the Gemara learns that we had him as well. Mepihem v'loy mepik sabah. You have to hear it directly verbalized by the edim and not from their writing. So the fundamental question about that is, where's the star coming in? How do you have a star?
It's just to remind the Adim.
But it's not. Even the Adim are not around. But even the Adim are not around. If you just have the lender bring your star to Bezin, and I'm a kind people recognize the signatures, I collect. So there's a star. It's a piece of paper. The PM and This is a question all the Shem ask. So the Rambam holds as a result of that beautiful B'chaim Briskin. This Perigim Chazedus. The Rambam holds that all stars are Midrabban. Ma'atreda no star is a valid star because PM and Piksavim. And then the Ramban asks on the Rambam. So what about a get? And what about Kedushin? It's a star. And according to you, it's always Rabbanan. So all getting them into Rabbanan. Very, very fascinating.
So
So the Chaim makes a difference with the star is a raya or the star makes it happen. When does the Rambam say that that star with Rabban and is just a proof? It's evidence. But the star, the role of a star in a get is not evidence. The role of a star in a get is it makes the get. Or back to do the same thing. The star makes it. That's that's something else. That's not PM Olympic 7. That's how Reb Chaim explained the Rambam Shitta, but the Ramban there argues and says all stars are Ma'atoida because of that. So Navas. So we have different opinions. Rashi says the Ksuz, if I remember correctly, lists 4 different opinions in showing to explain. But in a nutshell, Rashi says PM, since the Leva agrees to the star, it's no longer Ksavam, it's Ksavoy. When is a problem if only the Eidim are writing it for themselves? Here, the Leva is participating. So exactly. So it's not the East of Ksavam, it's Ksavoy, the Leva, the one who's indebted here is part of it. Okay. So that's the Ramban says the Ramban says if it's in the format of a star, not you're writing notes for yourself, to remember. In the format of a star, that's called a star, and that's Ma'atoida. That's good. The Rambam I just told you, and Shittas Taisus is in fact that there's nothing wrong with writing down your ages on a piece of paper. Taisus has an outlier. Taisus says, when it's a problem? Only if a guy you can't speak. When you cannot speak, then but if you could speak, then since I could speak, I can write down as well. That's how Taisa learns. So the word basically here is
so Elam can never.
Elam can't. An Elam can't be the Edis. Right, he cannot be the Edis. Whether he can sign a star is an interesting question.
He says that the PM has to be from someone who's actually.
So that's what Taisa, according to Taisa, is interesting. But Elam can be a signatory on a star. Okay, so bottom line here is that because this star is not mechayev the loive to pay the what do you call it, the encumbrance. Therefore, it's go back to Ksavam, according to Rashi, or according to Ramban, it's not the format of a star, so it's not really a star. And according to Taisa, have to work out exactly what's the problem here. So let's go back here. So Rabban is learning like Shmuel, and then he continues. But Rabban hold migbe gava. Rabban hold, however, that what do you call it? That Rabban hold you could collect, and therefore, because Rabban hold you could collect from the and therefore they said don't give back even if there's no encumbrance, don't give it back because the Malva is going to collect with it. How do you know it belongs to the Malva? The Lev is denying it. The Lev is saying it's fraudulent. We don't give it back at all. What exactly you can collect from, we'll see. Right now, Rashi says he can only collect from the Charim, but later will say you can collect from everything because we believe Achraya is Toya Sefer, which means you don't even have to bother putting in the star that I'm going to take, lien on your properties. Who's going to lend money without having a security, some kind of a security? So Achraya is Toy Sefer. The Sefer got to put it in. It doesn't really matter whether you do or you don't. So according to Rabbanan, since you can collect from, how can you give it back? Whether it's written in the star, what's written in the star, it says that Rabbanan, if he denies it, you never give it back. But if they would made it, you always give it back. But if you're made it, then everyone will give it back. And I hold exactly like Shmuel. And I'm not saying, I'm saying maybe he paid it up because we don't believe for a second that he would have paid it back. In other words, if he's made it, that he owes the money, we don't believe that he paid it and there's some trick going on because if he would have paid it back, he would have ripped it up. You think he's that trusting to the Malva that, I'll give it back to the star and, let's do this trick here? What did the Malva turn around and collect from him again? Look, and now he's not. But Yechina says, okay, so basically it sounds like Rabbi Elazar sounds like Shmuel. Rabbi Yechina says, Machlekes Kishachai Meida. Rabbi Yechina seems to learn like Rabasi and Abaya. That the Mishnah is talking about that the labor is Meida, and still we don't give it back. And why not? The Rameir holds star be'ein by Achrayis nechos. So and why not either because the star mukdim? That's why you don't give it back. But maybe it's wrong. It's just not kosher to collect from the kuchis because the date is written before, or like a baya eda b'chasum of zachale. But we'll soon see. But a star, if there's no achrayis nechasim, how can a mayor says it could give it back? If the guy is made, if the guy is made the money, you can give back because the only one you can collect from is from himself, and he's made, he owes it. What's the problem? So that's why the mayor says give it back. So how could Rabbanan say you don't give it back? Rabbanan Savadi Mishabadi Nami Gobi. Rabbanan hold that Achrayis is Torah Sefer, even though it's not written in the star. So if there's Moida that he owes the money, and there's no Achrayis written in the star, don't give it back to the Malva, because the Malva then can collect from the Kuchas and the same concern. That maybe it's a star Mugdim. But in a case where the Leiva denies that is a star, give it a Hakala Yachset. Why? The Chashin L'Parayin. Even if it's a valid star, maybe he did pay it. No, he doesn't agree with Shmuel that says we don't believe that, we don't believe for a second that the labor paid it up. He would have ripped it up. No, maybe he just didn't have a chance to rip it up and he lost it. Says the Gemara, Tanya was Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Bechad, Rabbi Shmuel, but we let the Bryce like Rabbi Yochanan, which supports Rabbi Yochanan. It rejects Rabbi Lazar with one question and rejects Shmuel with two questions. Let's go through it. Matzah started just like this. Matzah started Chayv. You found the Shtar Chayv, the Yesh Ben Machrais, written in the Shtar Chayv, there's a lien on the property. Nechas, Achais, Nechasim. Afa Pishish name Moedim. Even though they both agree, yes, I didn't pay the money back. You don't give it back. You don't give it back to the Malvin, go back to labor, nothing. What about this is like a Mishnah? What about Ein Behen? So, but the only thing is, this Bryce clearly says they are both Maida, right? They are both Maida. Ein Ben Achrais, you don't, you don't give it back because we're worried. Ein Ben Achrais Nechasim, but there's no Achrais Nechasim. So, if the labor is Maida, Yachzel Malva, you give it back. So we see clearly ain't a labor Maida, but the labor is not Maida. Then obviously Lo Yachzel Lo that you're made. Maid holds if the Malva is not Maida, then a maid holds you don't give back to anybody. And Rabbi Lazar clearly said that the whole machlekes in our mission is where the labor is not moida, and you still give it back. According to Meir, if it's only collects from labor, you still give it back because it's a worthless piece of paper. You cannot collect from anybody. Which is the opposite of the brisa. Even Meir, if there's a lien on it, you do collect from the chasim shabadim, and therefore and so why don't you give it back then? Because you're hurting the kuchas, maybe shtamugdim and maybe the shtamugdim, and that's why we don't give it back. Or maybe or maybe you paid up. And we're scared maybe you paid up or there's a deal going on. But if there's no chayz in the chasim, goy them in the chasim and the chayrin, you only collect in the chasim and the chayrin, and Amei says you give it back. You give it back if he's moida. And the chachamim say. What do you call it? That even if there's no achrais written in the star, you always collect the chashubadim. So it's Tiyuf to Rabbi Lazar b'chada, and the Omar, and the Morik spells out now. Now this part here, from Tiyuf to Rabbi b'chada, the Omar, this was says also not written by the Gemara, written by the Go'im. What's the question of Lazar? Because the Omar, it says he said star. What did Lazar say? A star that has no achrais lechasim, you cannot use it at all. It's a piece of paper only, because since there's no lien on it, achrais he doesn't hold achrais. If there's no lien on it, therefore it's just a milvat peh. So the paper doesn't add anything, and why not? Because the moment you didn't do the star correctly, it's pihemel and piksavam. So the aid is written there is worthless. It's ksavam. It's not a star anymore. Once it's not, they didn't write a form of a star. It's not a star. And he says, and he also said you can get. He said that if everyone is moida, you give it back. We're not worried that maybe there's some kind of deal going on. Really paid up. So two things he said. Right? He said if he's moida, give it back. We're not worried about any deals. And if he was not moida, according to the mayor, it's a worthless piece of paper. Yeah, the Bryce on both counts it says differently. He said, but the Bryce is clearly that you still do collect from Bnei Chayden, not like Rabbi Lazar says a worthless piece of paper. And also, Uktani, Bein Rabmeir, Bein Rabbanan, even if he's mighty, you don't give it back because Chayshim L'Kinunya, some kind of deal going on. The Uktani, obviously, Alma Chayshim L'Kinunya, that maybe he paid up, there's a deal going on. And he says that no. And the obvious question is, so why do we say it's only a question of Rabbi Lazar and one? You should just ask him two questions. In the case where he's moida, you ask the question, and the case where he's not moida. In the case where he's moida, you ask the question. You said that we're worried about a deal going on. The Bryce said worried about a deal, and you're saying we're not worried about a deal at all. Give it back. And if it's not moida, you said it's a worthless piece of paper, and the Bryce says clearly that yes, you can still collect from the chayd. Well, how did it to you? Well, it says no. According to by him, it's one, really one. You know why? The chad tamu. It's one is an outgrowth of the other. The Mishum, they come at Rabbi Lazar. Once Rabbi Lazar learned that our Mishnah is only arguing with the guy who denies it. So what do you learn if they all agree? You have no choice but to learn that if they agree, you give it back. Why aren't you worried that maybe that there's a deal going on? Obviously, you hold you're not worried. So it's even though it's a second thing, detail, it's an outgrowth of the first. Who metaratochi. So Beichai Maidu metaratochi has no breda. But why then Shmuel is a question or two? It's the same question on Shmuel. The same question of Rabbi Lazar. He looked at Rabbi Lazar. The Amish is talking about that guy denies it. But the Chadik of Shmuel elsewhere said another din to contradict, not with our Mishnah, and that's not an outgrowth of our Mishnah. That's why it's two questions. What's that? Shmuel said, "Much star hakna b'shuk." If you found a star hakna in the street, no, but it says that I'm committing my estate now. Doesn't matter when the actual transaction took place, if it ever took place, according to some. You always get back. What are you worried about? And I worry that is a deal. And Shmuel said that we were just like second question. It's nothing to do with no outgrowth, nothing to do with our Mishnah. It's another than he said. So you've the Tony Hawk here it says Alpha Pich's name lo yachze lo lazeh lo lazeh. Alma says clearly here you don't give it back. Chashin leprayin. Yeah, the Cholkin Hocha the Leimaida. Leiva the Chashin leprayin. If the Leiva denies it, surely we're worried there's some kind of deal going on. Shmuel says, you know why the Rabbanan say that you don't give it? The Rabbanan say lo yachze lo lazeh lo lazeh. Not because we're worried that some deal is going on. You know we don't give it back. Somebody hold achrayis is toy safer. They hold that the star, even if there's no achrayis written there, you can still collect from the lekuchas, and because you can still collect from the lekuchas, therefore we are worried that might be a star mukdim or whatever it is that we are worried about, and therefore.
Dafka for the professional ciphers, I shouldn't make mistakes.
Once it falls on the ground, it tells us something did not go right here. No, but he's saying here that even if you made a mistake, it doesn't matter. It's universal that nobody lends money unless there is security. So therefore, Yechrais is to say proof. Okay, we'll stop him tomorrow, Mitzvah. So we had like 5 opinions here in the Gemara.